Welcome. Thank you all for being here today. I am Nick Kanoki, the Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm very excited for today's ALN Thursday at 3 with Peter Kohler, Director of the Asset Management College. Before we get underway, I just want to especially thank today's sponsor, the US tag to ISO TC 251. And we want to highlight their new website, Campus, Community of Asset Management Practitioners in the US. And you can reach that website at assetmanagementusa.org to register your organization or look around at the resources. We also want to thank our patron members, as well as all of our organizational members. As you can see, it's a growing list. And if you're interested in working with the ALN, please reach out and we would love to talk more. And with that, I will just say a quick promotion for an upcoming event. Next week, May 11th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a global discussion on value in asset management. And that will be with today's Peter Kohler, as well as Sally Nugent of AM Reflections, and the ALN's Jack Kelly and Mike Bordenaro. And I think here, I'll just say, if you're out there watching, please send any comments, questions, or feedback to the chat, and we will put those to our panelists. Mike, you want to take us away?
Thank you very much, Nick. How are things on the beach there?
Oh, lovely, just lovely.
You're in Landers, Wyoming today,
Yes.
though.
Yeah, I'm quite far from this beach, which is actually in Thailand.
Where you were last year, or no, the year before that.
Man, time flies. It's been a few years now.
Yeah. And we've got Peter Kohler in Australia. And with Peter, we usually start with how did you get where you're at in your asset management journey? But you've been our guest before. You've been a keynote speaker. We kind of understand you've got a long history of asset management, but you've got your iron in a lot of fires. So why don't you give us a little overview of what you've got going on just now, instead of talking about your whole journey? Because asset management reflections is what you and Sally do as a conversation, and then asset management council, and you're the liaison for the asset management council.
The executive commissioner.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's essentially the job is to create relationships between the AIM Council and other organizations. Yeah.
Okay, great. And what does the asset management council do?
Oh, the Asset Management Council
I'm sorry, Asset Management College. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Asset Management College is an organization, a private organization, but it certainly I'm the founder of it. There's a whole bunch of people now delivering a whole bunch of courses and knowledge forums on the application of the discipline of asset management, and from that, of course, hopefully organizations will derive some benefit and value from. And so the conversation about the value from, for me personally, and the Asset Management College is quite important.
Yeah. And so when I reached out to you last year about one of our patron members wanting to know what the return on investment from asset management was, you got back to me really quickly. I was very impressed, and you had a great idea. You said there really isn't any statistical information on this. Why don't we start a web series and start collecting that information?
Yes, indeed. In fact, that conversation, Sally Nugent joined us in that conversation as well. So Sally and I are sort of tag team with each other. We know each other very well from the Asset Management Council. She was its first chief executive officer, and so some years ago, and she, with two others, the four of us actually created the Asset Management Council. So we have a relationship going back many years. So that explains why she and I work together in these things. We're very keen and vocal on the discipline, and both very keen to talk about the value the discipline can deliver. And I do emphasize can deliver. It doesn't always deliver it. Just because you invoke a discipline or apply it doesn't always mean it delivers value, but it should, at the end of the day, deliver significant value. In other words, the ROI should be high for organizations that implement it. So it's an important subject to talk about it because a lot of people, yes, it's a bit of a fad right now, possibly the discipline of asset management, but in reality, it is for most organizations who are asset intensive, a significant contributor, can be a significant contributor to the economic success of organizations.
So we decided that we should have this web series called Value and Benefits from Asset Management.
Absolutely.
And you helped guide us establish a set template for presenters. Each presenter has to answer the same sets of questions so that over time, there is a library of answers that follow. What are your organizational objectives?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. I think it's important that we not only talk about organizations that are certified to 55001. I mean, certification is a milestone on a process, and the process is all about improving the way the organization works and delivers value to its stakeholders, its clients, its community, whatever the nature of the business is. But so certification is a milestone. Certification of itself doesn't deliver any significant return on investment. It's the application of that discipline. It's the application of that asset management system, which has just been certified, that delivers the benefit, delivers the value.
And you had mentioned that it doesn't always deliver value. I'm in a very unique position where everyone who talks with the Asset Leadership Network is very happy about asset management. We've never heard anyone say, we wasted time doing asset management. So you've done implementations, you've seen it. There's got to be times when sometimes it doesn't work out. What are the times when people don't get value?
You're asking me what are the times?
Yeah.
There's a number. Certainly my experience is, have to admit, largely Australia and New Zealand and around Southeast Asia, but and I've certainly been aware of a number of organizations who are required to be certified to 55001 and who are certified to 55001 and 9001 and many of the other ones as well. But you couldn't argue that they derive any significant value out of it other than they're certified to it. Because for a number of organizations, it's sort of entry level to be able to do things. 55001 is often applied by regulators as an entry level requirement. So you won't be able to work around here if you don't have 55001. Unless you're certified to 55001 and 9001 and 18001 and 14001, all those other ones as well. So it becomes you've passed the test, you're now in, away you go. But for the rest of us involved in this discipline, it's not so much about a pass-fail test from which you can do some commercial activity. It really is about the application of a discipline of how you do things, such that the application of that discipline delivers value. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
And that's not the same, not always the same thing. Yeah, being certified is not the same as delivering value. In fact, you can deliver value from asset management without being certified, and that's one of the key tests, of course. Yeah. And many organizations do. Many organizations do. Yeah. All right, so certification is not in my humble opinion, certification is not a big deal. It's more the application of it that delivers the benefit. It's not certification per se that delivers any benefit.
Yeah. I've heard executives say they want the validation of certification so that they can have the proper appearance to their stakeholders.
Yes. There's a couple of aspects to that. One is, yes, you can put the logo on your website, so that looks nice, and then your stakeholders would be happy. But that's initially. So, but if I was the CEO or a stakeholder, I'd also be asking the question: well, being certified is nice. Now what? So we've paid all this money. We've invested a lot of time and effort in thinking about the application of this. Now, how are we going to apply it to deliver some value to the organization? So what is the return on investment of all this activity? Yeah, which is a neat lead into the conversation.
Yes. So you've helped us establish that the questions that we have for presenters to answer include what are the measurable
Yeah.
values and benefits that you have
Yeah.
received. And then we also say, what are the unintended,
Intangible. Yeah.
unintended.
Or intangible benefits as well sometimes. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah. And I often find that's the sort of make or break point of the conversation too, because when you start saying, so what are the tangible benefits? You often get a quizzical look come back at you, and that's interesting of itself. Rather than a quick, we had a couple of presenters who are quick to respond to the answer, right? Who actually know in not just always dollar terms, but other measurable terms. It's not always dollars, but there are other measurable terms who know what the value is. But equally, there's a number of people we've talked to that perhaps don't get to be asked to present, that can't directly answer the question. Well, so what is the value you've derived from the application of the discipline? That tells you a lot, I think.
Right. We've had people say increased share price.
Absolutely.
Staying in business when other competitors
Yeah.
had gone out of business. That's a pretty
Absolutely.
good value right there. And
Yeah.
it's kind of intangible, but very clearly measurable.
Well, share price isn't intangible. That's important to a number of people who are highly influential in many organizations. Yes.
And we have come on to the idea of grouping people from Australia and the US who have a similar asset category that they're managing. So we've had airports. We're going to be doing electric energy generation.
Power stations and distribution. Yep.
In the US, that will be on May 23rd, again in the evening, because we are in the evening on the East Coast, because we're being nice to our Australian colleagues and starting it at a reasonable time. Peter's up at 7 a.m. for this, so thank you, Peter. But then we also decided that we wanted to have a conversation outside of the format of our presentations and out of the success stories. So next week, you, Sally, Jack Kelly, and myself are going to be talking about value in asset management today. Why is this an important topic to discuss in this general term outside of the success story format that we've established?
I think there's a couple of very important reasons to talk about it. One is, most people are probably aware that Jack Kelly's involved in the rewriting of ISO 55000 and 55001. I was personally involved in the development of 55000 and 55001. And it was an interesting conversation to have with people about the value of the discipline, the application of the discipline. So what is the value that the discipline of asset management could create or can create? And so it's kind of logical, really, that with the development of the ISO, all these conversations were being had. With the redevelopment and the review that Jack Kelly's involved with, and many other people, I'm sure, on this call video would be involved with too. Essentially, you cannot have too many conversations associated with the value that the discipline might deliver. It also clarifies in people's minds what that value might be. The English language is quite a challenge, I think. To be honest, the English language gets in the way here, because value can be used as a noun, it can be used as an adjective, and so when people use the word value, it's often quite a challenge to think about what that might be and how should you describe that. So it's worth having a number of conversations about the whole subject of value and what that might be. Particularly from the perspective of what could or might be the value that the discipline could be realized from the application of the discipline.
So, from what I've heard, there's discussion going on inside the revision committees to prescribe value, and I think that's a mistake. Every organization can determine what value means to them. But I think it's important to say that value is something that contributes to the organizational mission success.
Yes, and it's like a lot of other things in life. Your notion of value and mine, even though we're looking at the same thing, can be completely different because your values are completely different than mine. I'm not suggesting they are here, Nick, Mike, but you understand what I'm saying, that the
Sure.
value is in the eye of the beholder, right? And so as soon as you mentioned that the ISO standard wants to prescribe the value, I get really worried about that, because that's a very kind of engineering view that we want to actually define these things when really we're dealing with people and people and organizations of people we leave it up to them to describe what that value is. Because who can possibly foresee all the circumstances in which what might be valuable to you might be valuable to me or not valuable to me. So we need to create a bit of a framework around, a bit of discussion around the notion of value, such that we don't exclude or include, particularly exclude things, because we just can't imagine what it might be in the year 2022. Who knows what 2023 is going to bring?
Yes. I like car analogies. People get car analogies. You might like a car because it's an electric car. I might like it because it's got headroom. I'm 6 foot tall and I, don't want to bend over too much to get into a car. And somebody might like it because it's blue. So we all value it, but for different reasons, just right off the bat. That's probably oversimplifying things, but.
No, but the analogy is true. I might value a car based on, I might look at a car and think it's a 1972 vehicle, but it's absolutely beautiful. And you might, from an engineering point of view, you might look at the car and say, geez, that was well ahead of its time. It was an extraordinary car for its time. But in 2022, it's kind of average. But in context of 1972, it was a fantastic car. That sort of thing. And so the notion of value is deeply personal, and from an organization's point of view, it actually does. The notion of value reflects the organization's internal values and see, interesting word, value and then values. But it also reflects what the stakeholders perceive as their value that the organization should be in the business of delivering as well. So I don't think you can have too many conversations about the notion of value because of the fact that, as we're just saying, the application of science to this, I don't think works very well. This is a humanities subject where you need to understand the possible permutations and combinations of I guess the human mind and the human spirit. Yeah.
And an organizational mission. So let's use the analogy
Absolutely.
with car companies. So car company A might value speed to electric vehicle production. And company B might value hybrid technology that reduces gas consumption. And they can both use ISO 55000 and get value for their missions, which are different because of their organizational leaders and what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I'll heartily agree. I think the scope within, if we come back to the ISO standard, scope within the current standard 55000, 55001 allows that sort of perspective. It doesn't actually encourage it, but it allows it. I think possibly, if I was involved in the rewrite of 55000, I'd be talking about encouraging those discussions, encouraging organizations to start thinking about and documenting, what's valuable to them, what value do they wish to see as a result of the application of the standard. Yeah. So, and that has to be a very broad conversation.
Well, this is fascinating, and I look forward to talking with you next week about this in more detail. But for now, I'd like to thank you for getting up early and joining us on ALN Thursday at 3.
It's a pleasure, and won't only just be me talking. It'll be, as you mentioned before, Mike, Jack, Kelly, Sally, and yourself as well, talking about the subject. So it's not just my personal opinion. And what I like about these forums is exactly that. it's a range of people coming together with a range of views talking about this subject of value, which makes it, even from my perspective, even more interesting and more and illustrates, I think, even further the need to have more conversations about the subject.
We were recording our recording, and we wanted to start off with that discussion with Peter, who's just a fascinating mind in asset management. Jack Kelly, you agree with that?
Absolutely. He's somebody that I met really, really early on when I was first learning about asset management and writing that white paper back in 2018 with Michael Hardy. The name Penny Burns came up in one of our conversations recently, and as I mentioned during that conversation, she was considered by a lot of people to be the originator of the term asset management in Australia, and this was back in the 1980s. And so I reached out to Penny to find out what her perspective on the origins of asset management were. And she said, well, I was there at the very, very beginning, but the person you want to talk to about what's happening today is Peter Kohler. And so I reached out to Peter immediately and have been in touch with him ever since.
Yes. So Peter and Sally are fascinating minds. I did not realize they had started the Asset Management Council about 30 years ago. So
Yeah,
they're
I'd forgotten that too. That's
way
huge.
ahead of us.
Oh yeah.
But they compliment us quite a bit by starting this web program with us.
Yeah.
Saying that there hasn't been anything like this in the world, and took our initiative to help get it started. And Peter and Sally have been deferring to our guests, the owners, the Air Force, the Atlanta Airline Terminal Company, the airline companies in Australia, etc. But they were chomping at the bit to talk about value themselves. So they wanted to have this program next week, and I was all for it. Let's give them some time. So can you prime the audience a little bit about some of the things that you'll be saying?
Yeah, one of the things I want to do, I want to emphasize one of the points that Peter, sorry about that noise in the background. My answering machine just went off. Anyhow, Peter's comment about value is a topic that deserves lots of conversations because you can look at it in lots of different ways. And when I first read about value in the context of asset management, I was really puzzled by what it meant, because it seemed to me that, to Peter's point, value is like beauty; it's in the eye of the beholder. And one of the things that phenomenon causes is people being nervous, as Peter was, about trying to be too definitive about value. But I think that's because sometimes we mix up our personal views of value with what needs to be organizational views of value. And organizations it's not useful for organizations to be kind of unclear about what value means to them, because at the end of the day, if you want to measure whether you accomplish value, value has to be measurable in some ways. And so for me, and this is sort of my personal view, but it's coming into the revision of ISO 55000, or at least it's one of the voices coming into the revision. I can't say it's still a moving target, so we're not there yet. But I think value is really, organizations articulate value in terms of their objectives. And if you don't articulate value in terms of objectives, and particularly objectives that are measurable, you're never going to know the extent to which you're achieving that value. It's just that simple. So there is a kind of a measurable aspect of value that I think is really, really critical for organizations, because you've got to be able to communicate, value. One of the fundamental principles is the alignment principle. So people have to align around an understanding of value, and from the top to the bottom of an organization. And that's really critical if you want to actually realize value in your organization. So I think on the one hand, sometimes we can make it too complex, too fuzzy, but on the other hand, to operate properly, you've got to have a value expressed in measurable terms, and you have to track how well you're doing in achieving that value.
And John Shelness picked up on the car analogies and said even old cars are valued, and sometimes very highly.
But by the way, that's one of the other aspects of value when in the conversations that we have within the ISO community, because there's a subset of very smart people that keep thinking about value in financial terms. And they talk about value, you know, and how value is measured and all that kind of stuff, but they're thinking about it in terms of financial measurement of value, financial characteristics of value. But that's not the only way that value is expressed by organizations. In fact, utilities, level of service, achieving the desired level of service, the level of service desired by your stakeholders, particularly your customers, possibly, and ratepayers, and sometimes regulators. That's really, really critical. And so that's an aspect of value that's of particular importance in the utility industry.
We can't have a discussion of value without including Jim Dieter. He's got some really good concepts on value. If he's able to join us, that would be great. And
I would value his participation.
So then if we could then close up kind of near the bottom of the hour. And then if anybody wants to join in the conversation, let us know. We'll promote you to panelist, and you can get your 2 cents in on value. Hi, Jim.
Well, hey guys, how's it going?
Good. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, Peter's great. It's always great to. He was one of the first connections I made to the international asset management community at a IAM conference many years ago before the ISO effort got started. So that was excellent. So let me put lots of good stuff. I agree with most of it. To me, from an asset leadership perspective, we need to put a different hat on. Since we're asset management professionals, we tend to think in terms of asset management professionals and what we can do. And we're very connected to the assets. If we put on the hat of an organizational leader, then the asset management system exists to help me understand and manage assets. And the only reason I have any of that I'm interested, or that we have it or have the assets, is to help achieve the organizational objectives. If we have assets that aren't part of that, then tell me why. So there's one thing it can do right there, is eliminate assets that aren't contributing to organizational objectives, or at least consider them. But it's, to me, very, very much aligned with contributions to the organizational mission and objectives. They aren't helping you get the job done that you set out to do. Where's the value? And so that's a positive thing. On the negative side, when I flinch when I hear anyone use the word extract and value together. And I think I understand where they're coming from, but it's like, well, let's run this sucker into the ground. Let's, whatever it is, whether it's a natural asset or a constructed asset. I don't think it's a helpful point of view on that. I think, we should aim for sustainable assets.
You have because of your love of baseball, Jim, you have an understanding of valuing players using a metric system.
Yeah, we talked about that some. So someday this is going to come together, maybe before we know it. I don't know. But if anybody's a baseball fan, there's a couple different systems that rate players, in their talents. Players aren't assets, of course, but their talents are assets. And an average player is a 1 point up. Pretty easy to replace, get another 1.0 person. It's a, typical major league player. Very good players are 1.3 or 1.4 is maybe a Hall of Fame level player that makes a huge contribution, makes quite a difference to the overall success of the team. And if you have somebody that's below 1, it's not so good. You probably need to replace that person. It's possible that we could come up with ways to think about assets, asset systems, asset portfolios in such a way. It's an interesting thought.
Okay. Well, Nick, if you will, come in and do a live close. This is the real Nick. This is not the pre-recorded Nick. And then we'll go to Boyd and others who might want to join the conversation.
Yeah, no problem. Great discussion today, and just want to make sure we thank this week's ALN Thursday at 3 sponsor, the US tag to ISO TC 251, and note their new website, Campus, Community of Asset Management Practitioners in the US. We will post a link to that in the chat so you can check it out and potentially register your organization. We also want to thank our other patron members because their continued support is essential for the ALN doing programs like this, as well as the support of our other organizational members. And you can see it's a growing list, so if you're interested in working with the ALN, please reach out and we would love to talk more. And just want to do a quick plug for next week's global discussion on value in asset management. That will take place May 11th at 6 p.m. Eastern. And today's Peter Kohler, as well as Sally Nugent and Jack Kelly and Mike Bornero will be there. I'll be there, and we hope to see you there to participate in the discussion. And with that, say thank you and pass it back to Mike. Shall we promote?
Yeah, I'm trying to promote Boyd to panelists, but I don't think I can do that. So if you can.
I did.
Okay, great. And if there's anybody else who wants to join the conversation, please just let us know in the chat.
While we're doing that, in listening to the earlier discussion, I do have to always say that although the Brits think they invented asset management and the Aussies think they invented asset management, the US government has been doing asset management in a systems approach to asset management since the Korean War era. I will give total credit to the IAM folks for popularizing the systems approach to asset management, but there were a lot of predecessors, to be sure.
Yeah, Jim, when I was researching that white paper, Peter Kohler was the person that pointed that out to me. He listed out a whole range of things back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that were invented in the US. But as you may recall from a conversation we've had with him in the last few months, he said, but the US seems to have forgotten them.
Well, in the area I was involved in government personal property management, which is, millions of dollars worth of stuff in the hands of contractors and federal agencies. The issue really is their thinking really hasn't advanced in 50 years. But they're still plugging along. I still have hopes to get them to think about ISO 55000. Maybe soon.
Well, they do. We've got quite a list of federal agencies that are onto that.
Yeah, well, yeah, not the DoD and the federal contractors. Federal agencies, a little bit. Yeah.
I see Boyd's joined us.
I have. I couldn't let you discuss value without getting my 2 cents in on this one. This has been a very controversial subject within the work groups of TC 251. I got to tell you, I'm in Peter's camp. Sorry, Jack. I'm of the beauty in the eye of the beholder. And if I'm paying for that beauty, it's whatever I want it to be. And just because something isn't auditable doesn't mean it doesn't have value to my organization. Now, if I'm the one paying the bill, then by all means, If I don't think it's a value, I won't pay for it. Likewise, if my stakeholders don't think it's a value, they won't be stakeholders for very long. I'm in a free market. So with that being said, if we are in fact in a free market, and let the market determine if you have the values that they want to invest in. A lot of people are divesting themselves of different organizations because they don't believe in them anymore. So that's where my 2 cents are at. Jim, which house are you in? I want to know.
I don't see it as a dichotomy. I see it as a range of views that organizations can take for their own assets. I think anybody that limits it unnecessarily to like the cost of an asset or the sale price of an asset, I think they're making a huge mistake. But it's more limiting than saying the one thing is and one thing isn't to me.
Well, by giving it a definition, which is where we're going at within ISO 55000, I'm sorry, I don't think we should define it because there's too many different definitions out there as to what represents value. We couldn't include them all. And as soon as you put one down, someone else will come up with a different definition. It's not so much a quantitative ones as it is a qualitative ones of what they feel is of value.
The 6 capitals people, and I don't have a link right in front of me, but had a paper, one of their foundational papers, and just a few pages in, it has a line that says, and of course, value can't be defined because it's different to everyone. And they just say it in a few words. And they've obviously given a lot of thought to, from the 6 capitals perspective of, what is making a contribution to organizational success.
So Boyd and I maybe differ less than he may think, in the sense that I think you want to be careful about having a single definition of value, but I think having a range of definitions can be useful, because some people, I think, struggle with how to think about value, and it's contextual. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say from an organization perspective, and what I was talking about earlier, having objectives, that are expressions of value. I firmly believe that. I'm not saying that those are the only expressions of value, because imagine that you walk into somebody's office, a corporate office, and one of the things you see is this logo that really gets your attention. Well, that logo, if it gets your attention, that logo has value to the organization, because it has created a reaction in you that they were trying to create, because it gave you a sense of the design excellence or some characteristic of the organization that was valuable for them, in their eyes, for you to have. And I think about like Apple equipment. The design excellence of that equipment is considered valuable by the people who love it. I'm one of those people, and I love it when I open one of those Apple boxes and it all fits together, and you just kind of are delighted at how well designed the thing is. And that has value, and that value, of course, for them translates into their bottom line. So,
yep. Perception is reality.
Boy, do you think that the idea that value is something that gives, that supports organizational mission success is a general enough definition?
Afraid not, because some things that have value may not be part of the organization's mission. All right. Again, organizations have multiple objectives, and it may fit one, all right, and be applicable to one of the objectives, but not all.
Does it have to apply to all of them if it supports one? Yeah.
Well, what's wrong with well, look at it this way. Someone who owns a company by themselves, okay? Should he be judged on what he values by some outside organization?
That would be certification. And yes, he would list the things that he says that he wants to value and show the actions that he's taking to value them. And then be certified by an outside. Pardon?
What if he values a certain methodology that nobody else does?
So in ISO
nobody else does.
So
in he loves
ISO,
it, you know.
In ISO 55001, he writes what that is, and then he is measured against whether he is fulfilling it, and therefore his value is measurable by an outside organization. And nobody else has to value it because he or her own the company.
When you bring an auditor in to assess whether or not you meet the requirements of ISO 55000, and they say, well, how does this provide value to your organization? If he says none yet, what's that mean? It's none of your business. That's what it means. It's my business. I own it. I'm paying for it. Why do I have to tell you what value it represents?
Okay, so that's what you're talking about is antithetical to the ISO 55001 certification process that I brought up for the example. So that's okay.
And you don't have to be certified, but if you certify, you know, it's like you have, you know, that's what you have to show people.
Is it auditable? I mean, what if it's a qualitative thing? What if he says, well, I survey my thoughts once a year and I'm happy with it? That's a qualitative measurement of the one person who is paying for it. If he says it's okay, and, you know, I like how I'm doing business, you know, it provides value to me. You know, what if it's something that nobody in their right mind would want to do, but they're doing it? And believe me, we see a lot of it out there. They don't believe in it, but, you know, they contribute to things that they think provide value to their organization. How about being woke? You like being woke? There's a saying, go woke, go broke. That was one of the things, because a lot of companies went with woke and they went broke.
Wow. So a lot of companies that weren't woke went broke also. So that analogy really doesn't hold any ground. But
well, let me jump in and jump back to something Jack said though about the logo. It's an interesting example. If you walked in and somebody had a terrible logo, you know, or it's the Enron logo after the you know, the fall, right? It, by the definitions and the use of value, it can be positive or negative. So that has a value, but it's a negative value. In my baseball rating analogy, that's a, you know, a logo that's like, is a 1.0. A great logo is a 1.2 or a 1.3, and a terrible logo can be, you know, 0.8 or 0.7. So, but it still is contributing to value.
When you applied the scale,
it circles back to what Boyd's saying is, you know, I think you have to look at it in terms of the organizational objectives. It's the only way that it really makes sense.
Yeah,
I think so too. You know, in that regard, I do. That makes sense, okay, but that's not how some people apply value, unfortunately. Sometimes they contribute.
So we're the Asset Leadership Network, Boyd, and we're interested in what the leaders are doing. Right? We really don't care about what the followers are not doing, you know. So, yeah, we could go forever on what people aren't doing, but thank you for
getting a lot of comments on this in the ISO committee, so I can tell you that that it's really contemptuous. Just from some of the comments I've seen, over the past couple of weeks.
Or just
There's
some of
gonna be a lot of
just from some of the
contention.
comments you make, Boyd.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say I was right. I just said it's an opinion.
You like to join the discussion, and we thank you for joining the discussion. Always
I
bring
appreciate it.
value to the conversation. So thank you.
All right.
And thank you, Jack, for joining us in this special hybrid presentation. Jim,
Always fun.
thank you also. And Nick, thank you so much for making it look like it was planned. So, and thank you again to our audience for joining us and engaging in this discussion. Have good days, and we'll see you increasingly in the month of May as we have many programs starting off with the one on the 11th.